Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking the Doctor Who episode Under the Lake. All in all, I thought this was a reasonably good Doctor Who episode. I guess it just sort of feel like there were bits of it that were just a little bit too cliche for my taste. Now the parts of it that were not like that were pretty darn good, but well, let me put it this way. My main thing with this episode is that it reminded me an awful lot of an old Fifth Doctor episode called Warriors of the Deep, complete with, monsters in an underwater base and folks dying left and right. And, well, what can I say? I mean, the base under siege plot is really a staple of Doctor Who, so you can't really criticize it that much. But, again, it kind of just felt like, wait a minute, this really does feel like one of the old episodes. Now, granted, I suppose this is probably less of an issue for people who are primarily into New Who, but keep in mind, I came into Doctor Who through old Tom Baker reruns on my local PBS station back when I was a teenager. So the similarities to this episode and that one really did jump out at me very early. Another big problem for me with this episode was the character Pritchard, the oil company executive prospector guy, whatever. I mean, he was just really a very sad, very weak rehash of Paul Reiser's character from Alien. And seriously, it's like, oh, the crooked corporate guy who's only cares about, profit sharing and is totally willing to throw the crew to the wolves. It's just like, oh, come on. Can we please do something a little bit more with the characterization of these guys? Because seriously, whenever you see somebody like this, 95% of the time it is a complete rehash, as I said, of Paul Reiser's character from Aliens. And I can still not look at that and say, like, man, it's the dude from My Two Dads. Okay, sorry, 80s TV weirdness. Also said the same reaction to the other dad from My Two Dads being on Tech War. But anyway, let's get into what's going on with the better aspects of this episode. One, they do bring back the alien, that interesting alien race from the God Complex, I believe it was, the sort of mole-looking people, and then slapping one of those guys in a weird sort of Victorian suit and then blacking out his eyes. I mean, the thing looked really, really creepy as hell. That was cool, and the ghosts in general look creepy as hell. So definitely good stuff. Certainly very fitting for an episode that would air in October with Halloween just down the road. Also, really great stuff between the Doctor and Clara, especially that little scene in the TARDIS where the Doctor is saying, like, "Hey, you're not me." And there are a lot of ways you can interpret that scene. Personally, I took it as sort of a Doctor saying, kind of reminding Clara, it's like, "Hey, you're not a couple thousand-year-old alien who can regenerate if you get hurt badly. Just be careful out there. Don't run out there and get yourself killed trying to save the day." And it's kind of funny that this episode should remind me so much of the Fifth Doctor story because, well, a companion making a foolish choice and getting themselves killed. Well, that happened to the Fifth Doctor when he lost Adric. So I can definitely see why, under the circumstances, maybe this sort of might bubble up in the back of the Doctor's brain. But that scene between him and Clara, that really was very sweet. One of, I think, the strongest ones we've seen between the 12th Doctor and Clara since Peter Capaldi came on the show. Now, the idea of what's going on here in this episode with the earworm thing, I can't help but laugh at that because I always remember whenever I hear that word earworm, I remember reading this article years ago. I think it might have been on Crack.com. It was talking about examples of words from other languages that we should sort of adapt into English, and one of them was from German, and the literal translation from English to German was earworm, and it means exactly what it does when people say it now: a song or something like that gets stuck in your head. So, I can't help but wonder if if maybe that article was sort of a little bit of the transition for how that particular word entered into the English language, much how most people who speak English nowadays know what the word Schadenfreude means from an old episode of The Simpsons. But anyway, just kind of getting back into things. One small problem I did have with this episode was the whole thing with there being the commander lady who was deaf. Now, I'm not trying to knock people with disabilities or anything like that. It just seems so to me very odd, like how this far in the future, and it was set like toward the end of the 22nd century, I think, if I remember the dates right, that they would even still have deaf people. I mean, with today's technology, deafness is probably something either technologically or medically we'll probably be able to cure within the next 20 years, give or take. But that's not really, I guess, the issue of it. I mean, look at blindness and Geordi LaForge. Well, with medical technology the way it is now, it's actually not too unreasonable to think that probably within another couple of decades, we'll be able to cure blindness too. And yet, they still had Geordi on the next gen. Now, granted, that show started in the late 80s when medical science is not, of course, as advanced as it is now. But still, you'd think that by the time of Star Trek, that doctors would have come up with some sort of a cure for that sort of thing. But the thing with Geordi wasn't really so much that he was blind, it was to show that, in the future, even people who were born with disabilities could overcome them and still go out there and become extremely valued contributors to society. And while I suppose that's message trumping practical reality, there does kind of have to be a point where you have to just sort of let that go a little bit. But I think I'd be a little remiss in my duty as a reviewer if I didn't point that out, because that is something that did pop up in my mind as I was watching this episode. And also, it just seemed a little bit convenient. I have a feeling that this lady being deaf is going to sort of be an essential part of the plot as things roll along, because, well, she can't hear, so then how is it that this thing can get a song stuck in her head, basically? I mean, granted, it's some sort of crazy ass thing from space, so I guess that might be able to get around that particular obstacle, but still. And it did provide that sort of humorous moment where the doctor's like, oh, I totally know sign language. It's like, oh, wait, no, that was semaphore. Of course, if you don't actually know what semaphore is, that joke's probably not quite as funny. But I know what it is, so haha. Other things. I have to give the show a lot of praise for the use of atmosphere, especially lighting in this episode. It really does feel like you're under the water, and this place is tense, and really the whole thing is serious. So the atmosphere of the episode is very, very good. The crew members on the base, I did find it a little bit weird that they mentioned, like, oh, I'm the doctor, I'm with unit. Like, everybody's like, oh my god, the doctor, really? It's like, really? I mean, is this... Well, I guess they're not exactly public knowledge. I mean, the one guy says he's thought about joining unit, so they're probably some people who are, they're not just like regular Joes off the street, but the idea of the doctor as someone that, anybody who wasn't really someone rather important in the government or we're involved in dealing with the weird stuff that has constantly happened would have even the slightest clue who the doctor was. I mean, look at episode Rose, where we see Clive, the Doctor Who conspiracy theory guy, on the internet, and he's pretty easily dismissed as just being a complete whack job. Meanwhile, these people in the show, they're like, oh my god, the Doctor, we know you. It's like, really? Because has the Doctor been hanging out and doing stuff with Unit continuously since the 1960s to the 22nd century? I mean, it's possible, but it seems really, really weird. That just kind of feels like they just sort of like, oh yeah, these people normally know who the Doctor is, so they're not going to fight cooperating with him. Nah, that's just a little bit too easy. But anyway, this all brings us to what we get, that really great shocker moment at the end with Peter Capaldi as the ghost of the Doctor. And once Clara sort of starts to see something out in the water, it's pretty easy to guess what's coming, but it's still nonetheless an extremely effective and unsettling shot when we see the ghost of the Doctor. And no, this isn't the first time that we've seen things like, the possibility of the Doctor dying. I mean, the Ninth Doctor got eaten by a space bat, and then Matt Smith's Doctor got turned into some sort of burn monster or whatever. So it's not like we haven't seen things like this before. And we, of course, know that the Doctor's going to get out of this situation. But it is, nonetheless, a striking and powerful moment, and a reminder that, hey, the Doctor does, even as powerfully as the Doctor does, play for real stakes here. And he's not immune to having really seriously bad stuff happening to him. It also serves, I think, as an important reminder that regeneration is not the same as a get out of death free card. There are limits to just what regeneration can bring people back from. I mean, again, going back to the Fifth Doctor, when he died from, I believe it was called Spectrox poisoning. And it was just something so horribly toxic that his the last words as he was about to die and regenerate were, sorry, weird noise outside my window. I've got it open for a change. Were him sort of wondering, is my regeneration ability going to be enough to bring me back from this? And he seemed kind of doubtful for it. And it was really touch and go, and even part of the reason why when he did regenerate into the Sixth Doctor, the Sixth Doctor was extremely mentally unstable for a while after that regeneration. I mean, he literally tried to strangle Perry, his companion, shortly after he regenerated. The Doctor was that mentally messed up. And of course, the episode Left Turn, where the 10th Doctor was killed in a base collapsing on him. They even said it happened so fast he didn't have time to regenerate, and it sort of heavily implied that he was crushed by falling debris. So yeah, I mean, you drop a building on the Doctor, he's not going to be able to regenerate from that. There are limits, and apparently whatever kills him in the past is outside of those limits. So it's a nice touch there, a nice little bit to remind us that the Doctor is not Superman. Also, the bit on a lighter note with the Doctor trying to read those cards to sort of that Clara obviously made for him to sort of come across as a more caring and empathetic person. Those were pretty hilarious. That's what was that whole thing. It's like, Doctor, you took apart the TARDIS radio to make a mechanical squirrel because you were bored one day. I have a feeling that might have been Matt Smith's Doctor that did that instead of Peter Capaldi's, because that doesn't seem like something the 12th Doctor would do. And anything else? No. I think that covers everything that I had to say this time around, guys. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier_Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.